Started.
Morning, everybody. Good to be with you today. Not as good to be with you. Ed, you won't be right now. Today's going to be our last day with Josef Pieper. My goal today, this is not going to be a step-by-step walkthrough summary of chapters 3 through 5 of Leisure, the Basis of Culture. You don't need me for that. You read it last week. You're fully capable of grasping it. What I want to do instead is make some connections, hit on a couple of highlights to build you more of a context to process what it is Pieper has to say, what his argument is, and how it may be relevant for you. Pieper reminds me of Luke Skywalker. Who's Luke Skywalker?
The son of Darth Vader.
He is the son of Darth Vader, and what's Luke Skywalker do? What's he known for?
He saves the galaxy.
Saves the galaxy from what?
From the Empire.
From the Empire, yes. So Luke Skywalker, when we first meet Luke Skywalker, I was -2 years old when the first Star Wars movie came out, but I saw Return of the Jedi in the theater, so I am not young. Luke Skywalker is a young rebel going up against the massive, evil, oppressive galactic empire, and although you know, because he's on the poster, you know he's going to win. You don't know how, and you're supposed to wonder, oh my goodness, is he going to be able to do it? Pieper's a rebel too. He's a Jedi of sorts. He stands against an empire. And that empire that Pieper is waving his lightsaber to try to defeat is what we've called the Empire of Work. The message, the notion, the concept that what we are at our core is workers, that we are defined by what we do. The communists will define us by what we do to contribute to the community. Capitalists will define us by the wealth that we generate for ourselves. So you've got your communists, and look, anytime you talk to a communist today, they're going to say something like, well, look, the problem is none of the past regimes have practiced true communism. If we could have true communism, true Marxism, things would be different. We'd have this workers' paradise. Maybe. But the fact remains that so far, every communist regime that's ever existed has been tyrannical and oppressive. The communists define you based on the role you play in the community. You're a cog in the machine. Now, what if you don't fit in so well with the community? What if you want to do your own thing? This is the weakness of the communists. There's no place for the individual in the communist system. It doesn't mean that communism is entirely morally bankrupt and irredeemable. It doesn't mean that Marxists don't have real insights that can benefit society. We're going to look at that question a lot more closely in Module 7, and then again Module 8, when we look at critical race theory, which is a rebranded version of Marxism. And the response is not going to be that it has nothing to teach us. In fact, here's something communism's good at. Right? Maybe it doesn't offer the best solutions. But what communists are good at and capitalists are not. Communists are good at recognizing when there is injustice, not just in the things that Kenza does or the things that Mandan does, but when there are injustices in entire social systems. For them, the communists, the system, the capitalist system built on wealth, their critique is, look, it grinds people under its feet. Capitalism does. Pieper can say all day long that it's sort of morally bankrupt to define a person based on the money they make, and that there are far more important things than money. Pieper can say that. Well, he can't say anything's dead, but Pieper could say that not because he's super rich, but he's a university professor, a published author. He's not going hungry. He's never been poor. Now, try telling somebody who lives in real poverty, try telling somebody who cannot feed his children that there are more important things than money. When you can't afford a sandwich, there are not more important things than money. For the capitalist fat cat millionaire to say cash rules everything around me, we can critique that. For the person who just needs enough to get a crust of bread for his son to eat or his daughter to eat, cash rules everything around that person. Capitalists leave those people out. Communists don't. Communism is not without its redeeming qualities, but it's surely not without its problems. Capitalism values the individual. Kenza wants to do her own thing. She gotta be me. I gotta be me, says Kenza, right? You gotta be you. If you try being someone else, I mean, you really want to be you? I gotta be me. I gotta do my own thing. All right. Capitalism loves that, but what does it miss out on? It misses out on the impact that my generating capital, that my building wealth has on everybody else. Everybody else doesn't matter. Whoever gets ground under my feet doesn't matter in a capitalist system. If you want to compare the United States and the Soviet Union in the heart of the Cold War, all right? So the average Soviet citizen was much poorer than the average American citizen. But the poorest Soviet citizen was much wealthier than the poorest American citizen. For all the evils of communism, it doesn't neglect the poor. And it doesn't allow crippling poverty. Nobody's getting rich in the USSR, but you're not, like, unless it's a blizzard or war or something, but you're not starving to death because you can't feed your kids. Another thing capitalism does, right? So it says, look, everybody can make as much money as they want. That's good. I'd like to make as much money as I want. They say, look, I know our laws used to be repressive, so different people didn't have the same opportunity, access to the system, access to making money, but we changed all the laws back in the 60s. Now, the law won't prevent anyone, not for gender reasons, not for racial reasons, doesn't prevent anyone from playing the game. And so you take the poorest of the poor, and you just told them, hey, you make as much money as you can. And you give them no opportunity to actually do that. So they create the opportunity for themselves. And then the system says, oh, no. We didn't mean make money that way. We didn't mean make money that way. And then we lock you up and throw you in prison. Yeah. Both systems can be very dehumanizing. And that's a point that Pieper makes. And when he does this, he cites this document, Quadragesimo Anno, of Pope Pius XI, and it was written in 1931. He cites the document favorably. The Pope here is equally critical of both communism and capitalism as not valuing the dignity of the human person. One of the Pope's points, you're almost as loud as I am. One of the Pope's points is that private property rights are real. Communists don't believe that. Everything belongs to the community, and that translates to everything belongs to the state. Pope says no, private property rights are real, but they're not absolute. So let's say Dan the man, he and his kids are starving. And Bernard d'Estoine is loaded, rich. And so Dan the man breaks into Bernard d'Estoine's house. He doesn't steal his TV. He doesn't stab him in the throat. He doesn't steal his PlayStation. He doesn't stab his PlayStation in the throat because it's a PlayStation. He takes some food out of the fridge and feeds his kids. Has Dan the man done anything wrong?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay, Steve, why do you say yes?
Breaking it in your
Breaking in. Okay. Greg, you said no?
Yeah.
Why?
Because he's just trying to feed his kids.
He's trying to feed his kids. So it's not my place to tell you what the answer is, but I'll tell you what Pieper would say, what Pope Pius would say, and what the whole Western Christian tradition would say. He's saying, no, he has not done anything wrong. Now, Now, Bernard's got the right to ownership of his food, but that right is not absolute. That property needs to serve the good of the human person, not the human person serving the good of property. Thus, it is morally impossible for a starving man to steal food from someone who has plenty. When Dan is starving and Bernard d'Estoine has extra, by allowing Dan to starve in the ancient and medieval Christian tradition, Bernard's extra is actually stolen from Dan. That the goods of this earth are there to serve the needs of persons. Why do I keep saying persons instead of people? You'll see in a minute. I know it sounds awkward, it'll make sense in a minute. Pope also says, back in 31, that all people are entitled to a living wage. For Pope Pius and for Josef Pieper, it is unjust and immoral for someone to be able to work full-time, back-breaking work, and not be able to support a family. That the business owner who gets wealthy on the back of a man who can't feed his children is doing an injustice, and that a social system that allows that is an unjust social system. What's minimum wage these days?
$11.
$11. Okay. So if you work, so let's say you get a minimum wage job. I make almost that. Let's say you get a minimum wage job in Davenport, Florida. You work 40 hours a week for $11 an hour. Can you afford to live in Davenport, Florida? No. The cost of living in this area is obscene. You cannot live full-time minimum wage. You cannot support a family full-time minimum wage. And Pope Pius and Josef Pieper say that is an abomination. That we are treating the stuff, the wealth, the money as being of more value than human persons. None of this means that either Pieper or Pope Pius or anybody in the Western tradition are against work. There is a place for the real dignity of hard work in this philosophical tradition. It can be found in a couple ways. So one, let's say you've got a job, you didn't really have the opportunity, or you didn't take advantage of the opportunity to build really marketable skills. So you've got a job that you don't really like, you don't really care about, it's hard, it's not very meaningful, but you're doing that job to support a family. There is dignity in that work. It doesn't come from the work, it comes from supporting the family. And a person can have some self-respect and a sense of the value and purpose in life, not based on the work that he or she is doing, but based on the result of the work, supporting a family. Or it could be that somebody's got a career that he or she finds very meaningful in itself. Pieper doesn't like calling what I do work, but it's, we're not going to change the entire language of a nation. So, the work I do, it's more of a vocation, a calling, a mission for me. I love what I do. It's intensely meaningful, and it's deeply woven into my sense of who I am. Many other careers are like that. You may be in the medical profession, you may be an artist, you may be a firefighter, paramedic, doing things that you find inherently meaningful. Well, then you don't have to look very far for the dignity in that kind of work. But I have a hard time, and I think Pieper would have a hard time, and I think Pope Pius would have a hard time, and Karl Marx would have a hard time. Give him his credit. Looking at somebody who, they're not supporting a family, can't afford a family, they got married and they have children, they didn't have the money to do that. And they never either didn't have the opportunity to build really marketable skills, or didn't take advantage of those opportunities. You can make mistakes when you're 15 and 16 and pay for them for the rest of your life, and it's unfair and it sucks and it's how the world is. And so you find this person slaving away at a job he hates. It's not meaningful, just to put some food in his mouth and a crappy roof over his head and go to bed exhausted and wake up depressed and do it over and over and over again. And I gotta tell you, I have a hard time seeing the dignity in that scenario. And I have a hard time seeing the dignity in a social system that mass produces that scenario. And I think there's a lot of room for critique of our own system here. So when I'm criticizing communism, which I'm happy to do, I grew up in the Cold War, I'm happy to criticize communism, and there's a lot of problems with it. I'm not saying our own system is without its grave issues. So where does leisure fit into this? I just know it. I just know you're going to survive through a reading of 2 whole paragraphs directly from Josef Pieper. It's going to take almost 2 minutes, and all of you will still be alive at the end of it. Pieper says leisure is a form. Well, I guess I can't guarantee you that. I don't see the future, but I expect all of you to still be alive at the end of the 2 paragraphs. Second period was like, no, woe is me, woe is me. They're like ripping their faces off. We don't want to hear this for 2 minutes.
Up to like a paragraph.
We ain't got that kind of time. Yeah. Leisure is a form of stillness that is the necessary preparation for accepting reality. Only the person who is still can hear, and whoever is not still cannot hear. Such stillness as this is not mere soundlessness or a dead muteness. It means rather that the soul's power as real, of responding to the real, a correspondence eternally established in nature, has not yet descended into words. Leisure is the disposition of receptive understanding, of contemplative beholding and immersion in the real. Leisure is not the attitude of one who intervenes, but of one who opens himself. Not of someone who seizes, but of one who lets go, who lets himself go and go under. Almost as someone who falls asleep must let himself go. You cannot sleep unless you do so. In fact, just as sleeplessness and restlessness are in a special way mutually related, so the man at leisure is related to someone sleeping. I'll say more about that in a minute. I want to come back to the question of worldview. That's how Scott Ray opened Moral Choices. We hinted at this yesterday too. Scott Ray in Moral Choices says there's 3 ingredients to your worldview, your whole picture of what reality is. One of them is anthropology. We talked yesterday, how we understand what it is to be human. One's epistemology, how we understand what it is to know and what can be known. And the other is metaphysics. Metaphysics is our understanding of being itself, our understanding of that which is. And to talk metaphysics for a minute, I want to introduce you to, I quoted him briefly in like the second class, but I want to introduce you to another philosopher. He's a little younger contemporary, American contemporary of Josef Pieper. His name's W. Norris Clarke. His sort of culminating work of his career is this book, The One and the Many, lived from 1915 to 2008. And I borrow this from him. Can you imagine, is it possible that there could be a being? First of all, what's a being? Something that bees. That's not a real word, but that's what it is. Anything that is a being. Can you imagine a being that exists in total isolation, with no connection to, no interaction with any other being, ever? Would that be possible? At least theoretically. Yes, Steve. Point at Kenza? Well, because she got a friend, she just didn't come today. Or maybe because I didn't put a chair there, that's why she didn't come, and I broke her heart. I didn't be mean to Kenza. I'll beat him up for you later, I promise. Bernard, beat up Steve. I'm one of them. Would it be possible for a being to exist in total isolation with no connection to any other being? At least theoretically. What do you think?
Probably.
Grace says probably. Okay, so at least theoretically, I suppose it would. In our universe, it wouldn't, because at least gravity interacts with every being. But theoretically, there could be a possible universe that consists of only one being with no interaction with any other being. Now, would it matter that this being existed?
No.
No. And I liked it in the last 15 years. We've revived the importance of that verb, to matter. To matter, something has to matter to someone or to something. A being with no connection to any other being, in total isolation, might as well not exist, even if it existed. Because the reality is, every being, everything that exists in the universe, exists in relationship with the other beings of the universe. Think about these three atoms. 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom. They're 3 separate beings, but they are drawn toward one another. Right? The hydrogen atom, it's as if the hydrogen atom longs to be connected to the oxygen atom. It's as if the hydrogen atom longs to give of itself to the oxygen atom, and it's as if the oxygen atom longs to receive the hydrogen atom and give of itself to the other oxygen atom. Part of what it means to be, to exist, at least according to Norris Clarke, is to be in relationship. To be is to be in relationship with other beings, with potentially every other being in reality. What makes persons? Why do I keep saying persons instead of people? What makes persons so special? Well, philosophers borrowed the term person from theater. Do I have theater nerds here on stage? I was a theater nerd in high school. Anybody else in the plays and drama stuff? Bunch of losers. Is right? No, it's right. It's not. She's not talented. So, the persona in Latin is the mask that an actor would wear in a stage play. Right? And it literally means the face you present to others. When the actor puts on the persona, he is presenting himself as something. I could put on this mask and then believably present myself as a bearded middle-aged man. That's the power. No, tough crowd. That's the power. You three are always laughing. When I say something, which by the way was incredibly funny. When I say something incredibly funny, you won't laugh. I always giggle about dumb stuff. So, philosophers borrowed this term, the persona, the person, to explain the unique kind of being that we are. What is a person? Well, this is my definition, but it's heavily influenced by Clarke and Pieper. A person is a being capable of conscious, intentional relationship, of making a gift of self and receiving the gift of self of others. All of the universe, all beings are constantly interacting, and they're constantly doing this. The hydrogen gives a gift of itself to the oxygen gives a gift of itself to the hydrogen, they receive one another's gifts, and then something new is created. A system, a group of beings working together to produce something new and extraordinary and unlike any of the beings alone. Water is nothing like hydrogen, and it's nothing like oxygen, and yet that's what it's made of. A person is a being capable of consciously and intentionally doing this, of making a gift of oneself and receiving the gift of self of others. In this model, every being has 2 axes. There's the axis of the one and the axis of the many. Every being has unity, all right? If I have Steve and Greg and Michaela work together as a team, that team is not a person. Those 3 aren't a person. They're persons individually, but a being has to be one. And yet, because every being exists to be in relationship with other beings, every being also has this axis of the many, an axis of plurality. In my definition here, when I say it's a being, that corresponds to the unity axis, the oneness axis. And when I say make open to the gift of self of others, that corresponds to the plurality axis, to the manyness axis. So let's look back at the communists. Here's where communism fails. Communism is great on the manyness axis. It's all about the community. But it fails on the oneness, the unity axis. Because the individual, we're all about we, but we don't care about Steve, and we don't care about Ralph or Yaneli, or Anastasia, or Yanelise, or Amanda, or Naleshka, or Greg, or Michaela, or Ken, or Bernard Deswan, or Gabriel, or Kenza, or Luis, or Eden, or Dan, or Elijah, or Piero, or Olivia Fernandez, or Alex, or Zoraida. We don't care about any of you, but we care about all of us. The oneness axis is lost. The individual is lost in the communist system. In the capitalist system, it's just the opposite. We love individuals. We idolize people who are extraordinary, extraordinarily talented, extraordinarily wealthy. And we fail on the we axis, the manyness, the plurality axis. I can make as much money as I want. And it doesn't matter if what I do to make that money drives Kenza's family out of business, and Gabriel's family out of business, and Bernard Deswan's family out of business, and Ken's family out of business, and drives them to the poorhouse. That's the market. That's the invisible hand of the free market wrapped around your throat. Y'all don't matter. Me. I gotta get mine. I gotta get my money. And the only limits we place on it basically are violence. I can drive Kenza into the poorhouse to make money. I just can't stab her in the face. Well, it's good that I can't stab her in the face, isn't it? It's good, but is that the bar? Is that the standard? So capitalism does great on the one axis, but it fails miserably on the manyness axis. And since the person is a union of the one and the many, both systems are dehumanizing. The communism makes the central focus of society something it calls the proletariat. When you were reading Pieper 3 through 5, he went on this tangent about deproletarianization. Proletariat is the working class. The workers are the central focus of society. The we, but not the I. Dehumanizing. Capitalism makes the I, the individual, the center focus of society, the wealth generator, and the rest of us get ground under his feet. What both Pieper and Pius and Norris Clarke would suggest, I suppose, would be that we set the central reality of society to be the human person. And since the human person is this union of one and many, every person is an I and a we at the same time. If we do that, we do it diligently, we would treat one another well. And we would not be trampling on one another's rights. In fact, it's the only way to meaningfully speak about rights as anything other than a useful fiction. Last couple of points. Who are my athletes? Steve, Bernard Deswan, playing football. What's your play?
Volleyball.
Plays volleyball. Anybody else? Suri, what do you play?
Plays volleyball and soccer
Plays.
and flag football and softball.
Well, okay, awesome. So we got football and volleyball players. Thankfully, I've put a picture of soccer on the screen to talk about sport. But tell me, what do you prefer to do? Play volleyball or clean the toilet? She prefers to play volleyball. Better play volleyball than clean the toilet. But let me ask you this. what takes more energy out of you? Playing volleyball or scrubbing the toilet? Playing volleyball. She would rather do the thing that is actually harder than the thing that is easier? Yeah. Because do you love playing, or do you love cleaning toilets? No. Sometimes you have to clean toilets, right? But you don't love it. She loves playing volleyball, right? She loves the game, all right? So her form of recreation, it's another word for leisure, and it's a word that literally means recreation. Her form of leisure, she recreates herself. She is most truly herself when she is at leisure, when she is doing what she loves, what she is passionate about, what she has chosen to do as a free person with her free time. She's more free, she's more real, she's more herself. She is Yanellier playing volleyball than she is scrubbing toilets. Reason Pieper says leisure is the basis of culture. It's because when we are at leisure, even if that leisure is exhausting, even if the leisure wears you out physically, it may still build you up mentally, emotionally, spiritually, if that's part of your language. I want to turn for a moment. Before we do that, if you watched, I had a couple suggested podcasts to listen to or watch related to leisure, the basis of culture. And the one that was a video where you saw the people interacting, the show was called the Burrowshire Podcast. And I wouldn't have shared it with you if I didn't think it was good. But I want to take issue with one thing. Most people I've listened to talking about leisure, the basis of culture, they'll pause for a moment to become kind of elitist about what counts as real leisure. So one of the things the well-meaning host of the Burrowshire podcast said was, when you're sitting in front of Netflix vegging out, that's not real leisure because it doesn't really recreate you. I don't have much patience for elitism. It could very well be real recreational leisure to veg out in front of Netflix. There's some great storytelling on Netflix. He wouldn't say watching a play by Shakespeare or reading the Iliad aren't real leisure. He'd say, oh yeah, those are real leisure. You recreate yourself there. Why not Netflix? I've got little patience for like the elitism that anything you actually enjoy, isn't as good. But it opens up an interesting question that I'll just raise the question and drop this pen. I'll raise the question, and maybe some of you can talk about this in your roundtables if you're so inclined. Do things that we do in our free time, we freely choose to do and enjoy, that are morally questionable or morally problematic, do those count as leisure? Is that really recreating ourselves? Are we being our best selves when we, everyone's going to define particular issues morally differently. That's why we have this class. That's why we have the round table. Is getting intoxicated, does that really count as leisure? Everyone's going to define sexual morality differently, but if someone's got a sexual ethic that says certain sexual behaviors are not moral, is engaging in those behaviors real leisure? Is playing a violent video game where you imagine you're raping and killing people, is that leisure? Is watching pornography leisure? Is breaking the law leisure if it's what you really like? I think I know what Josef Pieper would say. He'd probably say no to all of those. He's gonna on sexual issues, he's gonna hold a pretty traditional Christian perspective. He and Swoboda would both say that sexual relations between a husband and wife are leisure. Swoboda, remember, we watched the video of him. He's making his congregation laugh by talking about his parents napping on Sundays. People would say that's real leisure. Other things that some may find morally problematic, is that real leisure? Be interesting to explore. I won't be the one who explores them, at least not out loud. Be interested to see if some of you work that into your roundtable topics. That's not a command, but be an interesting direction to take. If you find 3 minutes have passed during your first day of roundtable and you have nothing else to say, that would be an interesting direction to take. Last point. You might have noticed at the end, the last 3 or 4 pages of Leisure, the Basis of Culture, Pieper tells you what he considers to be the ultimate expression of leisure, and therefore the ultimate expression of human personhood, because we are most ourselves when we are at leisure. And from Pieper's perspective, the ultimate form of leisure, and therefore the ultimate form of the ultimate expression of personhood, is worship, religious worship. Interestingly, when he makes that point, he's not making a religious argument. He could. He's a religious person. He's a Christian, specifically from the Roman Catholic tradition. But he's not making a religious argument there. He's making a cultural argument, because he uses illustrations both from his own lived experience as a Christian and from ancient Greek pagan worship. The dynamic here is the same. In worship, on the human level, I'm not saying Pieper would say that it doesn't matter who or what you worship. He would not say that. But it doesn't matter to this point who or what one worships. In the act of worship, one presents oneself united with a community of the living and the dead, unless one has invented one's own religion and then not told anybody about it. Other than that, every act of worship is a communal act. Even if someone is praying alone at home, it's a communal act, because he or she is part of a long tradition of a religious community. So one stands as a member of the community, and one opens oneself. One is offering oneself, the gift of self, especially if the worship involves sacrifice. And one is opening oneself to receive from whatever it is that's out there. From Pieper's perspective, people would say God in the Christian understanding, but the dynamic is the same if you're worshiping Zeus. The dynamic would be the same if you're in the mosque or the Hindu temple or the synagogue or any other context. Culturally, that's what's going on when one worships. It's not my place to say whether the whatever that one is open to receiving, whether that's real and what form it takes. It's just not my place to say as a public school teacher. Listen carefully to how I say that. It doesn't matter for this point. It doesn't matter from a cultural perspective whether Zeus or Christ or Odin are real or not. What matters from a cultural perspective is the standing as part of a community and opening oneself up. Now, we live in a pretty unique situation in world history. Most people who've ever lived have lived as part of communities where nearly everybody shared the same religious tradition. Now we live in a very pluralistic community. People of many religious traditions living side by side in relative peace, including a growing number of people who don't have religious tradition. I think one of the questions we'll have to work on answering, and we can't work on answering it without at least asking it, is if Pieper's right. Again, this doesn't depend on whether any religion is true or not. If Pieper's right on a cultural level that religious worship is an essential aspect of human culture, if that's not part of our public or private lives, what will we develop to fill that gap? What will we develop so that our lives and our cultures aren't missing that experience of standing in community and being together open to receiving whatever is on offer from whatever is out there? I think about that a lot. I won't tell you any of my answers, at least not until after you graduate. But I think it's a question well worth asking. This word culture The root word of culture is cultus, the Latin word that means religious worship. It doesn't mean that there is no more to culture than religious worship, but religious worship has always been the foundation on which human culture is built for as long as there's been human culture that we can say anything about. If we as a people, or a portion of us as a people, have moved beyond that as a meaningful part of our life, with what will we replace it, or will we just walk around with sort of a gaping hole in our soul, so to speak? Any final questions or thoughts? Ralph? Yes, thank you. Did you get that on video? Ralph, reenact. Point it, Ralph, reenact. I don't want you to miss anything. Yes. Am I not merciful? What'd you say? No! Yes. Ken, thank you very much.